Welcome to the Communities of Character podcast, the show that shares rich conversation about character development across different vocations and callings. I'm Jennifer Hogan, and today we're continuing our series on the 11 Principles Framework from Character.org. On today's episode, you'll get to hear from Dr. John Lowry, the former principal of a National School of Character, Shades Cahaba Elementary in Homewood, Alabama. He's currently in his first year as the Director of Academic Programs and Services at the Central Office. When I asked Dr. Lowry about his passions and mission, he said, really just trying to be a good human, loving others, doing my best to be a helper, and trying to be an example to those I'm around. You're going to love today's conversation. Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Communities of Character podcast, a place where you can learn about all things character. I'm your host, Jennifer Hogan, and today we'll be talking about Principle 2 of the 11 Principles Framework from Character.org. I'm so delighted to have Dr. John Lowry on today's show to share his experiences with character education. Welcome, Dr. Lowry.
Hello, it's good to be here, and I really appreciate you guys and this opportunity to talk about character.
Well, we're glad you're here with us. And Dr. Lowry, you're currently serving in Homewood City Schools as the Director of Academic Programs and Services. But for 8 years, you were the principal at Shades Cahaba Elementary. And Shades Cahaba has been named a National School of Character 3 times, 2 of which while you were the principal there. And I think it says a lot about the continuing culture of character that was established when you took over as principal, as well as the work you continue to lead while you were the principal there. And so would you share with our listeners how you got involved in character education?
Yeah, so when I was doing my master's degree and my specialist degree at the University of Buffalo, I became really interested and had a principal at my previous school who was very interested in single gender classrooms.
Okay.
So as part of an action through that degree program, I began to research a lot of single gender initiatives, and some states have pretty robust programs. Into that, the more I realized that it was really what those doing were a heavy component on character ed. And the more I researched that, the more I kind of felt like, well, it's really not about the gender separation, about the explicit teaching of character. And I started to see that, and then my career took me away from that district into Homewood, and I became an assistant principal at Shades Cahaba. And Sue Grogan was the principal there, and she had a huge heart for character education, and really was the heart and soul of that whole process and getting it off the ground and getting the momentum built. And I just really fell in lockstep with her and bought into the beliefs and the mission that we were working towards, and when she left, just continued to carry that forward.
That's awesome. And that speaks to her leadership for mentoring you and teaching you and empowering you so that you would be prepared as you moved up into that principal role. So I appreciate her and you for the work that you've done. But today we're going to focus on Principle 2, and that has to do with defining character to include thinking, feeling, and doing. And so from the character.org website, I'm just going to read the description of Principle 2 because it includes these statements. Students need opportunities to study and discuss each core value, to connect their social and emotional skills to the patterns of behaviors associated with each core value, and ultimately to internalize and express in their own words why they want to consistently practice these character strengths. Wow. So could you share with me and our listeners examples of how your school provided these opportunities to students?
I think if I had to pick out a principle from the 11 principles, this would be the one that is really the core of a good culture of character in your building. And I love the words that they use in the word practice, to
Mm-hmm.
consistently practice um, patterns of behavior. I think those things kind of set the expectation that this is a process that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and and to help students understand that we're on a journey, and good character is something that you have to continually work at. So at Shades Cahaba, we had a set of that started in the early 2000s, and we called those the Shades Cahaba Way. Those came really from a group of students that had recognized that our extended had kind of come up with some rules for after school, and those students realized that the way they interacted with each other was much different after school than it
Huh.
was during school. And they attributed that difference to that common language and expectation that they had. So
Wow.
the adults in the building uh, got together and kind of incorporated those expectations and those values into the whole school, and that became the Shades Cahaba Way. And it was at the time a set of six just core values for how we would all interact and live and learn together in the building. So for a long time, we had those values, and they were defined, but there wasn't a very um, I guess expectation of specifically how those looked throughout the building, what it meant to live those out. We all talked about them, and we all reflected, and but as far as explicitly teaching they meant and what behaviors line up with those values, we kind of have that around the building. So,
Okay.
starting in about 2016, we really started to dig into being very explicit with those, and we kind of came up with a whole matrix of behaviors that lined up with each values. So, for example, one of the values in the Shades Cahaba Way is show respect. Every person is important. So we as a and kind of lifted out, what does showing respect, every person is important, what's that going to look like in the classroom? What is that going to look like when you are on your way to arrival or dismissal? What does that look like at recess? What does that look like in the lunchroom? And we spend a large amount of time at the beginning of the year talking about those expectations and practicing those, and really throughout the year after they've been taught, it's all about framing um, the interactions and the things that happen in the building around those values and those actions. So helping students determine what I did either lines up with this value or it doesn't line up with this value. Reflecting and trying to get better, and stay on that journey along the way. So really, kind of in a nutshell, how that happens, and how that continues to happen at Shades Cahaba.
That's awesome. And those conversations are so important, those continued, consistent conversations. But I also happen to know that y'all embedded in those conversations some character cards. Could you share with our listeners about those character cards? I just thought it was so fascinating and so easy to implement. I wouldn't say easy to implement, I would say simple to implement. And it may be a practical takeaway that some of our listeners may like to hear from you about. So, could you share about those character cards?
Absolutely. So the character cards are little cards that the kids can clip to their backpack. A lot of our students at the time like to kind of decorate their backpack with different little items
with a, on the clip as they came in and left the building. So we came up with the idea of enforce these core values and these behaviors by recognizing good behavior with character cards. We have character cards for all of the Shades Cahaba Way statements, and whenever a student shows that good character and displays that either to an adult in the building or another student, we with a character card. And they take the character card and they can clip it on their backpack. And then kind of the common practice around the building is whenever you see a student with a character card, try and engage them in conversation about that. So if I saw a student that had, a yes that said listen to others and they will listen to you, I might ask them, tell me about what you did to get that character card. And that way they're reflecting on their own actions and connecting my actions and my behavior resulted in something happening that was positive and good and enabled me to do this thing that was a positive thing for my school and for me as well.
Yeah, and those cards, they go home with the students, and so it also extends out into the community and to families, and creates those conversations that caregivers can give at home with their students about what happened at school.
Absolutely, and that was another way to just connect home with the character program at school, so that the parents knew exactly what was and could engage in those conversations as well. We did that a variety of ways. We character cards just at once and would spend time at the beginning of the year and would really just recognize all the different behaviors as they came up. And we tried it other ways where we may really focus on one specific value statement. Maybe it was the showing respect. So that month we would, I would do the morning announcements and we would talk about showing respect and what that looked like and ways that we could show that respect in the building, and we would really focus our efforts on that specific statement. So there's not a right or wrong way to do that. It just we've done it a variety of ways and tried to let the needs of the school kind of dictate how we did that.
Yeah. Well, we always want our listeners to walk away with practical ideas that they're able to use. And what you just shared is something that could be adapted and used in other schools and settings. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious, could you tell us what your favorite activity in your school was where your students were able to practice their core values?
Yeah. And when I saw this question on our kind of planning sheet, I went back and forth. What I'm going to talk about really isn't an activity as much as just it's something that's kind of embedded in your Shades Cahaba, and we call them nest groups. They bring every student together, and it's a cohort of kids that are grouped together their entire 6 years when they're at Shades Cahaba.
Wow.
That core group of kids have 2 adults in the building that are with them, and they don't change either. When the 5th graders leave, they move out of the nest group, but then a new group of kindergarten students come in.
Mm-hmm.
So these nest groups are age. They are not tied to any academic goal or standard or anything like that. It's just an opportunity for the kids to be together and have a safe space with some adults that they can connect with and can be their advocates. And we meet every couple weeks for about 30 to 45 minutes, and we talking to each other, building good relationships, talking about our character ed, our core values, what that looks like, how can we live this out? Are there needs in the building where we can help others, needs in our community where we can help others, and that program would probably be my favorite activity to just practice all that. It's such a good opportunity for kids to talk about character, to find ways to act that good character out in the building, in our community, and it really builds good, strong relationships, which are so important.
Well, it sounds amazing, and you may have some of our listeners to reach out to you for maybe some more information or some tips or strategies. But I think that sounds amazing. Now that you've moved into your new position, you've kind of got a bird's eye view of all the schools in your district. So talk to us about like what adjustments have schools had to make right now during this time of the pandemic and the guidelines and changes that have come with it in terms of character education and character development.
Yeah, so I think the big of this is the connection piece, and just to be around other people and to engage and connect with them. That happens, so well, particularly in elementary schools, because those teachers do such a wonderful job of building strong communities in each of those classes. It's important to engage with people, outside of your group. The pandemic has kind of limited the opportunities that we have to create those connections and opportunities to be together outside of the classroom, because we want to keep everybody safe and kind of in their little bubbles in the building. So that's been one challenge through this through the past couple years, is how do we enable students to connect and engage with one another when we've also got all of these parameters about mixing groups together and trying to be distanced as much, wearing masks and things like that. That's certainly a challenge.
Sure, definitely a challenge. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. If you were talking with a team from another school where they had just gotten clear about their core values, which is principle one, what advice would you give to them as they're looking for ways to have their students understand their core values in terms of thinking, feeling, and doing, just like you did at Shades Cahaba? What advice would you give to a team like that?
So the first bit of advice I would give you is your time. Really making sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what those core values are, and what they are in terms of the thinking, the feeling, and the action is really important. And it's okay to spend a really large amount of time on that. You want that to be almost second nature. So being really intentional and thoughtful with how you communicate that out, and make sure that everybody is bought into that and lives that out. So that would be the first thing I would say. And the second thing is I would say go ahead and build out all of those pieces. What do those core values building? Almost I call it we call it a matrix of expectations, broken out by different parts of your day, and we can point to that and say, one of our values is listening to others. This is how that looks when we are in the hallway moving from class to class. This is how in your classroom. So taking the time to really break that down and be very explicit with how that looks.
Yeah. And I love the idea of having that matrix of expectations, because it also creates that common language for everyone in the building, staff and students, and as well as your other stakeholders. So kudos to you, and what a great bit of advice. I also believe in failing forward, and I know from experience and research that we learn more from our failures than our successes. And so, would you describe a misstep maybe that your school made in its character initiative and what you learned from it so that we can all learn too?
Yeah. So in John Maxwell's book, Laws of the 21 Laws of Leadership, he talks in that book about the law of momentum.
Hmm.
He relates it to a flywheel, and it takes a lot of effort to get that flywheel spinning, but once it's spinning, that momentum carries it forward. So I think I over estimated momentum at times and found that maybe I didn't do a good enough job of really inducting our new staff into the culture of the building and helping them really get on board and truly understand what our culture was as it relates to character ed and how that looks. Um, so, I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I think one of the things we do a horrible job at, not only from a systems approach, but also from a school approach, is we have these new faculty members that come in, and right before they're about to begin, dump all of this information on them. And, you know, um, that's there's so much going on in their brains about what they need to do. So
Hmm.
I think it's really imperative to make that a process and not just something that you share with them and then expect kind of for them to just pick up as part of their work, and following up with them, having intentional and purposeful conversations around um, those things to help them truly understand and know what it looks like to be a school of character, and how that plays out in our teaching and our interaction with the students.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'll be sure to link that book in our show notes. And also, I'm curious, what lessons like did you learn about character initiatives in your previous school that now that you're in a new district role as director of academic programs and services, how will you take that knowledge into your new position um, in your district?
Um, so I think what it's really given me is a, a real how you can really get overwhelmed with all of the tasks that come along with being in the field of education. One of the things central office is federal programs, and there's so many different pieces and requirements that go into that I mean, I really could turn that around and consume everybody's time at the local building with making sure that we've in place to be compliant with um, with all the regulations.
Mhm.
So um, really, what I'm trying to carry forward and um, kind of have filtered down is that that prioritization that needs to happen with what's the work that we are doing that's making a significant impact on our kids and their learning and their character development, and how do we make sure that that stays a priority. And I think you just have to do that by being really intentional and being well planned and making sure that the say the main thing, and you're not bogged down with managing a lot of other parts of the job that maybe aren't as important in what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So
A-
um,
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm
yeah,
sure there's going to be listeners who are going to be applauding right now as you share that. So I appreciate you saying that and putting it out there. And I've really enjoyed learning more about your school story today. And as we wrap up today's interview, I always like to ask, do you have a book or a podcast recommendation to share with our listeners that you found to be impactful in your character education journey?
yes. we talked a little bit about Sue Grogan at the beginning, and the culture that she established at the building when I came in, and then for me as I moved into the principalship there. But she shared a book with me as I made that transition from assistant principal to principal, and it's called Leading with Soul by Bowman and Deal, and it's a leadership book, but and it really is a fantastic book to really help you ask yourself the questions um, and you on track towards focusing your work on the things that are most important. And I've gone back to that book um, multiple times throughout my career and have it right here in front of me, and I'm constantly referencing that book because it's such a book, such a those of us who have a passion for teaching and learning and for character ed. It really does reinforce and encourage the reader to things that are important.
Awesome. Well, our listeners may want to reach out to you for more information about what we discussed today. What are the best ways for our listeners to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is really just through the old school email.
Okay.
I'm on the Homewood City Schools website. Under the directory, you can find my email address there. But I'm happy to talk with anyone, and character ed is a fun topic to talk about, and I'm always eager to anyone about those sorts of things.
Awesome. And I will definitely include that in our show notes in case our listeners want to reach out to you. And I just thank you for being here today, Dr. Lowry. I want to tell you how much I appreciate the work you led and will continue to lead in building cultures of character. And to our listeners, thank you for staying all the way through. Hope you got some good takeaways from today's discussion. And we always appreciate when you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss upcoming episodes. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.